Hello, everyone. Welcome in once again to Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. You know, some of our friends here around Dog Nation said I kind of look like Jim Nance and Butler Cabin when I'm doing this show. You know, I do kind of like to sort of give a little bit of a different vibe from time to time, kind of a different look overall with the way the setup looks. So we kind of go with a little bit different look for this. So I guess maybe in honor of Nance, I should give you a hello, friends. Welcome in. We'll talk some Georgia football. We'll get ready for the SEC championship game coming up on Saturday. Going to be a fun time. Over the course of our show here tonight, we'll hear later on from Georgia defensive lineman Michael Barnett. We will hear from offensive lineman Cade Mays. But we'll begin here in a moment with some of the things that Georgia coach Kirby Smart said going back to his press conference on Monday. And it's going to be kind of funny, actually, in a moment, because Smart actually had a pretty humorous exchange with our buddy Chip Towers from the AJC about the challenge of a defensive-minded coach like Smart, and I don't think he's ever made any apologies for being that. He's obviously a guy who loves defensive football, and he gets a chance to match wits with Joe Brady and Steve Ensminger on Saturday and the likely Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, Joe Burrow. And he was asked, you know, how much are you looking forward to this? How much do you relish this? He had kind of a funny response to that, but it really kind of led me to think about the fact that, you know, all things being equal, in a lot of ways, Smart is put together almost perfectly to kind of go at this thing on Saturday. And the way that he's built the Georgia roster, I'm not saying Georgia's going to win this game, but in terms of having a really good chance of doing that, obviously the way in which this Georgia roster is constructed, you couldn't ask for much better in terms of trying to compete against, you know, an elite offensive output when you think about the way in which the Georgia team has collected these defensive back recruits over the years. Bringing in, you know, a lot of top guys. Smart's obviously probably been as good as any coach in the country in terms of, you know, going after these and developing these defensive backs. DeAndre Baker won the Thorpe Award in 2018. You know, a guy like J.R. Reed came over to Georgia as a Tulsa transfer. That's not a guy that had much of a track record before he arrived here, and yet he's obviously having great success in a Georgia uniform. Smart has developed and acquired defensive back talent probably about as well as anybody could. And so in terms of not just the defensive side of the ball that he's interested in, but that particular aspect of defense, that's obviously something that Smart has been incredibly strong with. And so that particular matchup, that battle of all these LSU receivers, including Jamar Chase, who may end up being the Blitnikoff winner here this year, against a deep crop of Georgia defensive backs, kind of forced to become deep on the basis of injury. The fact that Tyson Campbell really hasn't seemingly been at 100% in quite some time. He's missed a lot of time on the field. You had Eric Stokes briefly missing some time on the field. You've had a number of guys kind of battling injury, being off the field, which has forced DJ Daniel to get ready to go. It's kind of forced Tyreek Stevenson to be ready to go. And it seems like Stevenson's had a little bit more involvement here over the course of the last couple of games, last month or so of the season. Tyreek Stevenson has become a bigger part of the defensive back game plan, that defensive back story. The battle between these Georgia defensive backs and the LSU wide receivers, the LSU passing game led by Joe Burrow. Obviously, I'd love to be able to tell you it's a guarantee. It's already done. I've already read all the headlines on Monday or Sunday morning. I know Georgia's going to win this game. Obviously, none of us know that for sure, but I don't know that you could put together a defensive unit that has a better chance of doing that than the one that Georgia has in store for LSU on Saturday, given the way that these Georgia defensive backs can pressure the line of scrimmage. And ultimately, I think that's what a big part of this is about. I think that Georgia's got to be aggressive in terms of how it matches the LSU receivers at the line of scrimmage, popping them, being physical right there off the snap. Doing that then gives a chance for Azeez Ojulari and Nolan Smith and Tyler Clark and the would-be UGA pass rushers to have a chance to get involved there. So ultimately, I think that's the big matchup that determines a lot about what happens on Saturday. But Kirby Smart was asked about how he feels about getting ready to get geared up and take on this challenge of the LSU offense. He had a funny response to that. He also talked about a number of other subjects, including just how much defense in 2019 still can win championships. Here's Kirby Smart as a part of Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union as we get ready for Saturday's SEC championship.
Kirby, you're a longtime defensive coach. Does part of you relish the challenge of this, like trying to figure out a way to do something that nobody else has done this year?
I mean, I probably did until about yesterday afternoon. I started watching the tape, and then you realize that there really aren't weaknesses. I mean, arguably one of the best backs in the country. I mean, just vicious, attack you, spin you, hit you. In the biggest games, Clyde Edwards has been one of the biggest players. Joe Burrow speaks for herself. I mean, I could go on and on. Wideouts, tight end. They got 5 really returning starters on their offensive line. They got defensive players. I mean, they got an outstanding all-around team. It's a tremendous opportunity to measure where you are as a team when you get an opportunity to play a team like this that is firing on all cylinders. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect game. Nobody will ever play it. But what they did last week on A&M was pretty incredible on all 3 phases.
You were on Alabama staffs when that team made repeated trips to this game. What's the experience advantage, if any, and especially what does it mean for your team to have a quarterback who's making his 3rd straight trip to this game?
I think experience is valuable. I think the experience is in the Mercedes, stadium, the routine. You go over there Friday, you walk through. We don't typically walk through where we play. Well, this is a different deal. So we go over there and walk through where we play. And, a lot of our kids have done that a couple times now, but we got 20 or so guys that have never done it because they're freshmen and it'll be their first time. I don't think that's a big advantage by any means, but our kids have played in it. Like I said yesterday on the teleconference, their kids have played in a ton of big games. It's not going to be any different for them or us when you play in the SEC and the stage you play on week in and week out. You're playing on CBS in front of the largest crowds in the country.
Kirby, I guess the old Bear Bryant quote was defense wins championships. People have latched on to that over the years. How true do you think that is in today's world of college football, or are certain offenses kind of ahead of defenses and trying to catch up?
You got to play good football to win, period. I don't know that the adage defense wins championships stands as much as it used to. When you saw scores from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and you saw scores of games, it was indicative of defense compared to now. Now it's like I got to play pretty good defense and I got to score a lot of points. I can't play horrific defense. I can't play bad defense, but I might not have to be perfect is the way a lot of teams have had success. And they probably take more chances and risk and they just score tons of points. I'm not talking about LSU. I'm just talking about college football because I think LSU plays really good defense and they are explosive on offense. But, an explosive offense allows you to play a certain way on defense too because you know that you're going to score a certain amount of points. And sometimes that changes things. But, I can't say because you could go over the history of last 10 years, still been some really good defenses that have won national championships. The Alabama ones, the Clemson ones, a lot of them get overshadowed by really good offenses, but there have been some good defenses win it.
So pretty interesting stuff there from Kirby Smart on how defense does match up with an elite offense like this. And if the adage really is true that defense still can win championships, you can see the entire video there on the Dog Nation YouTube page. You can watch the entire thing for yourself. This is Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. As we take your comments here coming up, we'll still hear from a couple Georgia players before we're done tonight as we preview what's going to happen on Saturday between Georgia and LSU in the SEC Championship. And, of course, we appreciate Georgia United Credit Union being a part of the program. And one of the really cool things they're offering right now is a chance to get yourself your very own Georgia Bulldogs debit card from Georgia United Credit Union. 3 different design options to choose from when you open your free Georgia United checking account that also includes options to earn interest. Now listen, Georgia United Credit Union is so much more than a bank. They've got 19 branch locations throughout the metro Atlanta area. They'll give you access to up to 100,000 surcharge-free ATMs. They've got enhanced security features. They'll provide you convenient access to your money through online banking. And the best way to get in touch with them and to find out just how easy membership is to go to this website, gucu.org/GoDogs. That's gucu.org/GoDogs. You can learn more about Georgia United Credit Union, and you can also find out about how you can get yourself your very own Georgia Bulldogs debit card. All right, let me get some comments here. On Facebook, Lucy Bowers-Boykin says, I want UGA to win, but I'm really concerned about how we match up to the LSU receivers. Help me out and give me some hope. So, listen, obviously there's nothing I can do to say I know for a fact that Georgia's going to win the game because the honest truth is I don't. I think this is a game, and you'll hear me say this a lot this week. I think this is a game that Georgia has a chance to win. And frankly, anyone who doesn't think they have a chance, I don't think is being very fair here. I think Georgia has a chance to win. Obviously, I'm not going to upgrade that and say I know for a fact Georgia's definitely going to win because I got great respect for LSU. I think it's a really good team. And I agree with what Lucy said in the comment section here that those LSU receivers and the way that Joe Burrow has thrown to them all year long has been one of the main reasons why they've been as good as they have been. So I totally get that. But speaking as a fan, a guy that's obviously got the Georgia, I got the UGA 10 shirt on right now. So I'm obviously a Georgia fan. Speaking as a fan, and also speaking to the extent that I'm an analyst, I'll speak to you as an analyst too. I've got no fear about the Georgia defense matching up with the LSU offense. Now, that doesn't mean that Georgia keeps them off the board all day long. At some point in time, LSU is going to get a big play or two. That's just the way it's going to work out. But in terms of Georgia doing enough defensively to give itself a chance to win in the late stage of the fourth quarter, hanging around, causing LSU to be below their typical season total for both yards and points, do I think this Georgia defense can do that? Do I think the secondary in particular can set the tone by matching them against the LSU wide receivers and giving that a chance to happen? I absolutely do. So if your biggest fear for this game on Saturday is how Georgia guards the LSU receivers, then I think you ought to feel pretty optimistic. Now, I think there's some bigger issues maybe than that facing Georgia, some bigger question marks we don't quite yet know the answer to. But in terms of what the Georgia secondary is going to do, what the Georgia defense overall is going to do, I expect a pretty big performance from that group. Let me pop over and see a few more comments. We'll get to some YouTube stuff here in a moment. Marie Saudi says, I ain't worried. I have a gut feeling we can win this. Well, there you go. That's all you need to know right there. And sometimes that's what it is, right? I mean, listen, we can analyze this till we're blue in the face. And heavens knows by the time Saturday gets here, we're going to have cut this thing up 500 different ways. We all will, whether it be you in your private conversations with friends or us on broadcasts like this. But at the end of the day, I think Marie's kind of right. It just kind of comes down to a gut feeling. And some people, that gut feeling is a little nervousness, a little anxiety because maybe they have bad memories of the 2018 SEC championship game. I get that. For some people, though, it's about that positive vibe that comes from watching this team play with its back against the wall throughout the entirety of the month of November, starting with a big rivalry win against Florida, and then kind of continuing on after that. Georgia's just kind of answered the bell. And maybe that's what it leads to for some of you there as well. But, Marie, I think that's a pretty good comment. Ray June Johnson says, as long as the defensive line helps the secondary and vice versa, we should be fine. Yeah, one of the things you hear guys talk about a lot is complementary football, how one group complements the other. And in this case, well, I agree with Ray all the way around that defensive line is going to help the secondary is going to help the defensive line. I think when you go back to early portion of the season, like say the first half of the season, when Georgia was a lot more aggressive about trying to dial up some of the havoc plays and seemingly was trying to dial up more of a concerted pass rush earlier than it has been recently, I think what you saw from Georgia is they were like a step away. Am I right in saying that? Didn't you kind of see it that way yourself? Like a step away from getting there. I mean, Nolan Smith was like this close to bringing down a quarterback. Azeez Ojulari, who would get a sack, but was like this close to getting himself another one. And like Quay Walker come busting through on an interior blitz as a linebacker. He's like this close to getting there. Sometimes it's a second that means all the difference in the world. My question would be to you, where does Georgia get that second? I think here's where the answer to that question comes in. Here's how I think Georgia gets that extra second that it needs to finally get a quarterback on the ground when it does decide to dial some blitz pressure. As I said before, you've got to be incredibly physical at the line of scrimmage. This is a day for the most intense press man coverage I think you can bring to the table. Now, I know the LSU receivers are the kinds of guys that want to feast on that. Joe Burrow is the kind of smart quarterback that wants to identify that and throw to it. But this is what big boy football is all about. It's about playing as aggressive and physical on the outside edges as you do in the interior where the lines of scrimmages are. And if Georgia can do that, as Ray June said, it helps the defensive line out and gives that group a chance, and front seven all the way around, to get the pass rush going and make things difficult for Joe Burrow. You've got a great strategic battle going on here between how much you blitz him, give him that to think about, versus how much you try to contain him, make sure he doesn't take off running. Burrow's capable of doing that. And how many times you kind of drive back and just try to put as many hands as you can in would-be passing lanes. I think that's a really interesting part of the debate heading into Saturday. BJY says, a game that could very well end up in overtime, help or hinder us. I think our defense makes one more play than their offense. Yeah, listen, I think one of the things that can be really fun is watching a defense like Georgia's on a short field, 25 yards and in. All of a sudden, I think LSU, I mean, listen, LSU is hard to defend no matter where you face them, no matter how you play them. But think about this. One of the biggest challenges for LSU is you got to worry about like the 30-plus yard play, which means safeties have to be worrying about what's going on behind their head. On a 25-yard field and in, all of a sudden you don't have that much to worry about quite as much anymore. All of a sudden the space on the field dictates that it must be shorter throws. I'll tell you, this Georgia defense can be fun to watch. A Georgia defense in an overtime situation on a in kind of a much smaller field, 25 yards and in, that could become a very interesting group when they have 11 really athletic guys that can travel a whole bunch of ground. Good stuff there on Facebook. Let's get some YouTube stuff here for a moment. Then we're going to hear from Georgia offensive lineman Cade Mays. One of the things that Cade's going to talk about when we hear from him, what it was like to lose to LSU in 2018, the message maybe the team gave itself coming off that, and maybe if there's any chance there's a little bit of revenge Georgia would like to get on Saturday. We'll hear from Cade Mays coming up on that here on Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. First, some YouTube comments. Brian McPhail says, first, big question, can DeAndre Swift play? So for those of you watching this video live right now, what is it? It's about 6:15 or so, Within the next few minutes, and you'll see some stuff on this, Kirby Smart's going to speak, and I'm guessing that he'll be asked about Swift again. So if we see something on that before our show is done from those guys in Athens for us, we'll kind of throw that up there for you. But around the time we're ending is around the time that Kirby Smart press conference will begin. We can't show it to you live, but we'll be there live covering in Athens. Conor Riley, Mike Griffith on hand for that. And if by some chance it happens to start before we're off the air and we hear something on Swift, we'll give it to you. We talked about this last night on our program. It's obviously a bit interesting that the update that Smart gave on Swift on Monday was so different than the repeated times he was asked about it on Saturday after Georgia Tech and on Sunday when he did the SEC coaches teleconference ahead of the SEC championship game. This could have just been Kirby Smart being tired of being asked the question. Certainly a possibility. Or maybe Smart learned something that caused him to want to downgrade expectations for Swift. Or maybe he's just trying to play games with LSU. Right now, really any of those guesses seem about as reasonable as another. But certainly what Smart says about that today, as we sort of shoot this live on a Tuesday, that'll be an interesting part of this discussion to be sure. All right, some more YouTube comments coming in. Dog Life Ain't Easy says, ain't nobody scoring 40 points on us. And Dog Life, I would agree with you on that. Enrique Murillo says, I don't think we will use Swift as much as we would have if he were 100%. Look for Cook and Zeus to be impact players and more to distract the LSU defense. And here's the thing I'm going to say about that, and I kind of briefly touched on this on Dog Nation Daily today and probably should have spent some more time discussing it. So if you think about, and for those of you that watch or listen to Dog Nation Daily, we do the show every single day, even during the off season. And one of the things we end up talking a good bit about is what we thought was going to be a really deep crop, a really deep stable of Georgia running backs. Suddenly we kind of maybe, at least there's a sense in which we feel less that way because Georgia has leaned on DeAndre Swift so much. But y'all, I mean, let's be real here for a moment. Nobody is shedding any tears for Georgia if it has an injury to running back, even to a back as significant and spectacular as DeAndre Swift can be, because the backup situation here is Brian Harrion, a senior who's had a lot of play over the course of the last few years, a lot of experience that he has on his shoulders. A guy like Zamir White was the nation's former number one running back coming out of the class of 2018. James Cook, famous last name, brother's a star running back in the NFL. Cook himself was an elite recruit for that class of 2018. There's obviously a case to be made that what Georgia has with its running back depth is the envy of the rest of the country. And while winning the game gets a lot tougher if DeAndre Swift is not playing, shudder at the thought of that, or maybe playing but not 100% healthy, that's certainly true, but it's also true that maybe this is that game where Georgia shows off what it has had waiting in the wings for such a long time anyway with White and Cook. I mean, after all, White and Cook are expected to be big parts of the running back story next season. If that's going to be true in 2020, along with Kendall Milton, who's coming in as a freshman, and Kenny McIntosh will be in his second year in the program, but if that's going to be true for White and Cook then it stands to reason that it should have a chance of also being true here in the 13th game of the 2019 season as well. So running back will be a story, but maybe Georgia reminding folks that, yeah, this is still a program that kind of thinks of itself as RBU and has a lot of depth. That running back position, that could be a big part of this story all the way around. All right, it's Road to Atlanta. We're presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. We've got Michael Barnett coming up on today's show. Pretty interesting assessment from him about how this Georgia defense kind of matches this LSU offense. But for now, it's Cade Mays, a guy who's really emerged in this program, a part of the team that lost in Baton Rouge last year. What did that mean to Georgia at the time? What did the Dogs take from that maybe they can use on Saturday? Here's Cade Mays, the Georgia offensive lineman, kind of a Swiss Army knife on those subjects and a whole lot more. It's Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union.
Kenny, what do you remember about that LSU game last year, sort of how things went down? Does that have any sort of carryover into this year's game?
Yeah, that was definitely a big game. We didn't get the job done, and I'm 0-1 against them, so definitely don't want to be 0-2.
What was your sort of feeling after that game, and sort of given just the way that it sort of played out?
It was very disappointing. I was disappointed after the game because it would have been an opportunity to beat a big SEC West opponent, and we didn't get it done.
Have you said anything, if at all, to George, or sort of in the aftermath of how that's all gone down?
No, I haven't. I feel like he knows what he did is wrong. I mean, he apologized formally to the team yesterday, so he knows he's in the wrong. He knows he can't let that happen again.
And then, obviously the DeAndre Swift injury is a concern, but how confident are you guys, and regardless of, as an offensive line, regardless of who you have behind you at running back, you guys are going to be able to open up?
Yeah, definitely confident. When we play, we never know who's really back there. So we've got a bunch of backs we rotate in, so we really never know who's getting the ball. We just go and try to do our job.
So a couple comments rolling in. This is from Kirby Smart just a moment ago. He says you can tell the extra juice is flowing out there at practice. That's certainly great to hear. In terms of the offensive game plan changing because no Lawrence Cage or George Pickens, he says it's hard to change the offense in just a week. Now, of course, remember, Georgia does get George Pickens back for the second half of the SEC championship game. So a couple comments there rolling in from Kirby Smart, who is starting a little bit of a press conference right now. We can't show it to you live, but it'll be up on the Dog Nation video channels, including the Dog Nation YouTube page here coming up in just a couple of minutes. For now, though, it is Road to Atlanta presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. And of course, our friends at Kroger, they do a great thing this time of year. It's really fun. It's a tour of various Krogers with legendary former Georgia coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, who has already made a couple stops on that tour here thus far this year. Got a whole lot more to come. So if you've got someone on your list who's hard to buy for and you never quite know what they want, well, an autographed book by the legendary former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley always makes a great choice. Whether it's Dooley, My 40 Years at Georgia, or one of his books that kind of touch on history like The Legion's Fighting Bulldogs, Vince Dooley books are terrific gifts, and getting a chance to meet him at a local Atlanta Kroger or a Kroger here in the North Georgia area, a great way for you to just also have a great time there as well. Kroger loves dog fans. They're huge supporters of us here at Dog Nation, and this time of year, they welcome back UGA greats like former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley. So if you want to find out about some Kroger locations where Coach Dooley is going to be over the course of the next month, check out dognation.com. You can kind of see that right there at the top of the page, and you can find out a whole lot more about that. And of course, we appreciate Kroger being a part of what we're doing tonight here on Road to Atlanta as well. A few more of your comments. We'll hear from Michael Barnett in a moment. Jacob O'Neill, how about this, saying, all I want for my birthday Saturday is Georgia win the SEC championship. Listen, I know that'd be a happy birthday for you, but all of us would enjoy celebrating with you on that if that's indeed what goes down. Jacob, I'd like to hear that. David Calloway says, we abandoned the run last year against LSU too early, and I think that David's right about that. I think that what Dave Aranda did, the LSU defensive coordinator, certainly seems like the way they use Braden Fehoko, their big interior defensive lineman, kind of maybe putting him right over Trey Hill in that game, or I guess it would have been Lamont Gilliard a year ago. I apologize. Putting him right over Lamont Gilliard, kind of changed the tone inside the interior of the line of scrimmage. Georgia offensive line battling the LSU defensive line, and boy, it led to a situation when Georgia tried to run the ball. It wasn't as effective as we're used to seeing it. And in some cases, I agree with the commenter. It seemed like Georgia just kind of got away from that a bit. So I think that you're kind of right about that. That's one of those things when you go back, and maybe some of you will, kind of dial that up on your DVR and go back and rewatch from that Georgia LSU game. I think you see some things from Georgia in that game you don't like. It's one of the worst games of the Kirby Smart era, and I know for the players who played in it, a chance to get some retribution for that performance. I'm sure they'll be eager for that coming up on Saturday. Good comment. Barry Gully and others were kind of talking about LSU throwing a pick, and obviously that's one of the things that while the Georgia defense has been really stingy this year in terms of forcing those turnovers, haven't done as much of that this year. LSU, because they throw it so much, are obviously just bound to have, occasionally more turnovers than other teams just because they're putting the ball in the air more. So Georgia's finding a way to get one of those, or maybe do what Auburn did a couple times on Saturday, actually turn those turnovers into points, pick sixes. Boy, that changed the game in a big way. I think you're right about that. Jeff Boyle looking for 2 free tickets on the 50. Good luck on that. Hope that works out for you okay. Bryce Dixon also talked about the fact that he believes that no one's believing in Georgia right now, and that can be a source of motivation for Georgia in the game. And I talked about that this morning on Dog Nation Daily, and my point about that's going to be this, is that actually kind of playing up the underdog role too much in a game like this, history shows that's not exactly what you want to be. Underdog is not exactly what you want to be thought of. The Bear, Chris Felica from ESPN, kind of gave us these numbers that for the most part, both if you care about the Vegas point spread, even straight up in terms of the winning team, favorites have just dominated not just SEC championship games, but the Power 5 conference championship games now going back a good number of years, kind of for the entirety of the playoff era. The favorites have done very well in these Power 5 conference championship games. So from that standpoint, maybe Georgia doesn't relish the opportunity to be the underdog in this game. Maybe it shouldn't think of itself that way, especially given the fact that in some of the best performances of the Kirby Smart era, whether it be the 2017 SEC championship game, close for a while, Georgia dominates in the fourth quarter, 2017 Rose Bowl, where Georgia faced a pretty big deficit, had to come storming back, 2018 Florida, where a game that was close for a while that Georgia kind of dominated as the game came to an end. In some of these games that are close and tied early, thinking of yourself as an underdog might be the wrong psychological ploy there. Thinking of yourself as the favorite expecting to win may give you a better chance of weathering those early storms in which a team like LSU is bound to put a couple big plays together from time to time. So I think that's an interesting mindset for how Georgia might approach this game, viewing themselves not under the context of what's happened over the course of the last 12 games, but the viewpoint they had of themselves going back to the summer, when at SEC Media Days, they talked about wanting to do more. They talked about wanting to finish this season better than it had finished for them in the 2018 season when they left Atlanta in the SEC championship game a little bit short, a couple yards, a couple points short against Alabama. Well, the good news for Georgia is they're right back where they expected to be, not against the Crimson Tide, but against another elite team, and a chance to finish that off exactly what they expected to be doing, maybe exactly the way in which they expected to do it, viewing themselves not as the underdog, the team that doesn't have a chance to win this game, but the favorite because they never anticipated being anywhere but here. To me, that sounds like maybe the best mindset overall for Georgia. A couple of YouTube comments, and then we'll hear from Michael Barnett on a number of subjects. Also, another quote here coming in. Here's DeAndre Swift. This is Kirby on Swift a moment ago. So this is, day 4 of this now in terms of Kirby Smart's update. We'll see how this one sounds, and you'll be able to watch the full video of this on the Dog Nation video channels, including YouTube, later on. Smart says he's been out there doing what we asked him to do. He's practicing, banged up. He's a warrior. We expect him to go. And he actually kind of indicated that the shoulder injury to DeAndre Swift did not come on the play that the fumble was forced, but actually a little earlier in the game. So that's an update from Kirby Smart on DeAndre Swift's status. You can read more about that coming up at DogNation.com and see the entire Kirby Smart video interview, the press conference. By the time this show's done, Connor Riley should be about ready to have that put up on YouTube, so you can check that out coming up here in just a matter of moments. For now, though, one of the interviews that took place yesterday was with Georgia defensive lineman Michael Barnett on the subject of fighting against that really, really good LSU offense and the feeling of being back in an SEC championship game once again. Barnett spoke on those topics and a whole lot more, so hope you enjoy that as part of Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union.
So far, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back.
I feel like he's a very versatile back. I mean, he knows how to run the ball. He knows how to catch the ball good out the backfield. I feel like he's a really good downhill running back. He's going to try to go through you instead of, juke and finesse. I feel like he knows how to play both part, but I feel like he's best at, when he drops his shoulder into you, try to get those extra yards.
And then how much does last year's game against them really matter or carry any weight going into this week?
I mean, it does hurt a little bit that we lost, but, last year's team is different from this year's team. So we're just looking about, how they're playing right now, what they got right now, and what they're good at right now.
What was your sort of feeling after that game last year?
I mean, I messed up my ankle that game, and I couldn't really finish that game, so I was really mad that, we lost. And, I mean, that is a good team. The environment was crazy, but, I mean, it still hurts a little bit. But at the same time, it's like focusing on this year and what they're good at and doing now.
I think one of the things that makes this Georgia team different and better than the one that lost at LSU a year ago is the depth along the defensive line. Last year, Barnett and that crew just didn't have nearly as many capable bodies as they have performing at a high level right now. So I think the Georgia defense is no doubt in a better position against the elite offense. Now, this LSU offense is also a lot better than it was last season, too. There's no denying that. The Georgia defense has improved as well, and it's Barnett's position group, I think, where a lot of that improvement has come. They're just able to play more guys, and more guys are able to provide capable performances and significant impact. So the Georgia defensive line, for me, is a big story in the game on Saturday. We'll do a couple more comments on both Facebook and YouTube. We'll get ready to wrap up this program, and of course, we appreciate you being with us as always. Let me do Facebook here for a moment, and then we'll get some YouTube on the way out the door. Vernon Luzier says, please, Matt Landers, find your confidence, and I'm sure he will. He got to catch on Saturday. Another guy that has been embattled a bit based on our comment sections, who I think really found some confidence on Saturday, at least it would seem to be true, was Tyler Simmons. And I think that given the first half where Georgia will play without Lawrence Cager and then for the entirety of the game as well because of his injury and because of George Pickens' suspension, I think a guy like Tyler Simmons showed against Georgia Tech on Saturday, and I realize that's a very different kind of opponent than one the Dogs going to play this week. But I think that Simmons showed you that maybe that's one of those guys that Georgia will lean on with no George Pickens out there in the first half, with Lawrence Cager being injured. You mentioned Matt Landers, but I tell you, I really like what I saw from Tyler Simmons on Saturday. Kennedy Reynolds, appreciate you checking in, feeling pretty good about the game. John Coker on the subject of Lawrence Cager, the ankle for him is going to keep him out, likely into his season, even if Georgia extends it all the way to a national championship game. It sounds like that's about done for him. He says, Amos Williams says that he feels like Georgia went into the game overconfident, unprepared last year against LSU. And isn't it kind of funny? That storyline from kind of the middle of the season, whether it be South Carolina this year, LSU last year, maybe you could say the same thing about November at Jordan-Hare the year before, although admittedly that might be a stretch. But seemingly Georgia in October is not the same team it is in November now the last couple of years. Kind of interesting that storyline's duplicated itself 2 years in a row. More comments coming in. Stephen Carr calling on Tommy Bush maybe come up big. He is healthy. He is back playing again. Frank Watt says, BA, we got to win. My wife is a graduate from LSU, and I need a year of peace in my home. Yeah, Frank, listen, we need that for you there as well. You don't see quite as many Georgia LSU houses divided just because of the geographic distance between the two schools. But in those places where it does exist, I know that a happy home life for you will mean getting a Dogs win. So we'll be rooting for you to be able to do just that. Herbert White says that BA, I've got such a strong feeling that the receivers are going to show out. Boy, Herbert, I think there's a chance you may be right. I certainly hope it's true. But I think this group may be coming together at just the right time. At least that's what you hope for anyway. Matt Talley on the subject of DeAndre Swift, obviously from what it sounds like you heard from Kirby Smart there, they're going to do everything they can to make sure that Swift is as healthy as possible. Rick Wallace says, I'm so sick and tired of the so-called experts, and he uses that in quotes saying, we don't have a chance. Yeah, Rick, I think we all know the opposite's true. And like the one thing that I'd be suspicious of is anybody who tells you, yeah, man, Georgia's going to go out there, they're going to dominate this football game, they're going to just run up and down the field. None of us believe that's true. We certainly would love for it to be true, but none of us believe that's true. Here's what I think I know. I think that Georgia is the tougher team. I think that Georgia will be the more physical team. I think that Georgia will have a slight talent edge based on the way that it's out-recruited LSU over the last 4 years. Jeff Sintel wrote about that at DogNation.com here on this Tuesday. I think that Kirby Smart is absolutely the defensive mastermind equal to what Joe Brady's going to do for the LSU offense. And I think that this is about all you can ask for in life. This is a fair fight. LSU has impressed more pundits, more like casual fans this year than Georgia has. But I agree with you. Push that aside for a moment. Two teams, one of them 11-1, one of them 12-0. Georgia been on the scene now for a couple of years. LSU emerging in a big way this year. Both sides got a lot going for it. It's just kind of a fair fight. So you know what you do in a fair fight? You roll up your sleeves and you see who's going to be the better on that day. And as I said, I don't think you can ask for much more than that. I really don't. A couple of YouTubes and we'll get ready to go. And we appreciate you being here with us. Brian McPhail likes the 6 o'clock time. Yeah, this is something we like to do for special occasions. We typically do this for SEC championships, and who knows what other games might be on the horizon. But we kind of like doing these extra shows on these really big weeks. And obviously, it takes a lot of people to put a show like this together. People on the other side of the glass and putting on the video together. If it wasn't for our friends at Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union, we would not be able to do that. So huge thanks to them for making all of this possible. Worm giving us the Tyson quote of everyone has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. And if you're Georgia, You hope you're the one doing that punching on Saturday in the early going, really establishing a physical brand of football that LSU, at least your hope is, they know they're going to have a tough time matching. Buddy Lee Z on YouTube says, BA, if people saying the wide receivers can't get open, could the backups be any worse to see playing time? You know, I'm going to hold out hope that much the same way we said this week about James Coley and Jake Fromm, that given the SEC championship game on Saturday, what could be a playoff game after that, and if you want to really dream big, could be a national championship game after that, that's 3 more games that Georgia could play. That, over the course of a 15-game season, if Georgia plays that long, that would mean that 20% of the season is still to come. 1 out of every 5 moments for this season still hasn't occurred yet. So in terms of what the receivers have been or haven't been thus far this year, that story, I believe, could be a long way from being written. After all, Pickens, who we'll only see for a half on Saturday, has been a freshman, but Saturday's his 13th game. Dominic Blaylock didn't go through spring practice. Shows up in the summer. Has been a freshman, but Saturday will be his 13th game. A lot of these guys are getting experience at the right time. And the veteran presence of Tyler Simmons, who admittedly has probably not had the season that he wishes he could have, did have a performance on Saturday that leads you to believe that he may be ready to provide that leadership and that on-field example for Georgia on Saturday. So obviously there have been a lot of questions asked about the receivers, and as you point out, some of the rotation of that group and guys who maybe played more than you want or some guys who haven't played maybe as much as you would like for them to, that's been a big storyline. But maybe this group's got something special in store for this upcoming weekend. We shall see. A couple more real quick, and then we're going to get ready to go. Eric Brown says, look for D-Rob. They certainly targeted him a lot on Saturday. They seem to be trying to get him involved. That's a nice thing to be able to see. Stuart Nick says, I know it was tech, but the offensive play calling and execution was nice. Fake screen to Cook to a wide-open Pickens touchdown was a thing of beauty. I agree with you on that, Stuart. I agree. Worm feeling like DeAndre Swift's going to be fine. That's good to see. It is fair to say that what we just heard from Smart a minute ago, that's not quite the, oh, he's fine, he could have gone back in the game on Saturday talk that he gave you right after the game against the Jackets. It seems like that we're kind of in a permanent, at least verbal downgrade from Kirby, which doesn't mean anything in the long run. But he's talking about it in a little bit more cautious tones than he once was, maybe. Jermaine Jones says Tyler Clark gets greedy on Saturday. I think that'd be a fun thing to think about. Really good comments coming in. We'll obviously keep these going all week. So here's what the rest of the week looks like. We are going to be here live doing this show every night at 6 p.m. That means Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But very special on Thursday if you're in the Atlanta area, or we've got people coming from all around, Florida, Tennessee, everywhere else, to be here for this. We're going to be at the Marlowe's at Peachtree Corners. That's 5210 Town Center Boulevard. That's at 6 p.m. this Thursday. It won't just be me. The former Georgia All-American John Stinchcomb going to be on hand. Jeff Sintel, in honor of the fact that the early signing period for recruiting will be beginning really just a few days after that. Jeff to talk recruiting, John to preview the SEC championship, me to enjoy some chef-inspired food, some craft cocktails. We're going to sort of cover all the bases there that night at the Marlowe's at Peachtree Corners. This is an amazing location. We had a blast there earlier in the season. We're looking forward to being back here this upcoming Thursday as well. Want you to be there with us for it too. So Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union, live Thursday from the Marlowe's and Peachtree Corners, also at 6 p.m. So broadcast time the same, but a bigger, more expanded event there that night starting at 6 p.m. Hope you make plans to join us for that. All right, so Kirby's going on right now. You can see that on the Dog Nation video channels, including YouTube, in the next few minutes. You can read more about what Kirby had to say at dognation.com. Interact in the forum at forum.dognation.com this week. Share your thoughts about how you think the game unfolds. Talk to other UGA fans there. And, of course, I will see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. back once again for Dog Nation Daily. The good news is we talked about Sean Bailey being on the show today. Sean had a scheduling conflict, wasn't able to be with us, but he's going to be with us on the show tomorrow. Mike Griffith there checking in with his thoughts on the Dogs as well. So busy Dog Nation Daily tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'll see you there for that. But for now, thanks so much for being with us. For Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union's presentation of Road to Atlanta, we will see you again at the same time tomorrow night. Have a great evening, everybody.